Hello everyone and welcome to another vlog. Today is going to be a little bit different. From time to time I receive a comment that says, please post your unedited photos. So today it's exactly what I'm going to do. I've selected 30 photos of mine made in Tuscany, in the Dolomites and in Norway, and I will show you the raw unedited version. And I'll also offer you tips, ideas, post-processing suggestions, and what other ideas comes to mind. So let's get started. Here are the photos that I want to show to you. I have, as you can see, 30 photos. Let's click and shift select all of them and click reset all, just for you to be sure that the settings are reset and these are unedited photos. So let's start with the photos from Tuscany. Now, as you can see, this is sunrise light, and this is a thing that I really like doing, is to have the light only shine on my subject, and you'll see this through many photos of mine. Over here I have the sunrise light on this property, and then I have these two other areas in complete darkness, and I think in this way your eye will be captured by the subject much more. The image will be much more compelling, much more dramatic, and much more interesting. And now in post-processing, probably I will go for a panoramic view, because this area over here and the top of the sky, it's not that interesting. Let's move on to the next photo. I photograph this property a lot, and sometimes when the grass is higher, I stay really low, and this way I use the grass to hide this road, and I have only the cypress trees and the property. Now the road doesn't harm the photo. It's a beautiful leading line. The thing that I would do in post-process, probably I will get rid of this pole and the wire. I will dim down the brightness of the clouds over here, and I will put a much more bigger emphasis on the house and the cypress trees. Now this is a sunrise in Pienza, and as you can see, the light was not visible. I have some vignetting because my ring adapter from the holder is not screwing as it should because of dust. I have to clean it up, and I have this in a lot of my photos, but it's easy to fix. Now, because there was no sunrise, I decided to do a long exposure, and I'm using this balcony railway as a leading line. These are the stopping elements, and everything is taking the eye towards the church tower over here, and I'm using the movement of the clouds to add drama to the image. Here we are in another town from Tuscany, and we were caught by rain, and we were taking shelter over here when I noticed that there are these two stairs that have this center point, and the stairs form a really powerful leading lines, a set of really powerful leading lines. And I waited, and a couple of people passed, but this guy over here looked very interesting and in tune with the landscape. Now, it would have been better if I would have had a white silhouette, for example, but in a weather like this, who goes out dressed in white? When I'm photographing inside towns, I like photographing from darkness towards light, and in this situation I saw this moisture on the ground, this water on the ground, and I think it works really well as leading lines and as taking you to the back here. But the thing that I did was not using the circular polarizer, because if I would have used it, the reflection from this area would have been gone, and I wanted that shininess to use it as a leading line over there. We shot the sunset over here, and after the sun set, I say, okay, let's stay for a little bit longer, mainly for the lights to be turned on and to light the town. But I also saw some fog in the valley. While the sun was still above the horizon line, the warmth of the sun was evaporating the fog as the fog was rising. But now that the sun is gone, the fog can raise, and I was really lucky to create this dramatic image. Now, the fog over here not only adds atmosphere, but it also adds separation, and it helps make this town pop. because it stays between the town and the forest. Both are dark, and with the fog here, the image looks much better. Now in post, probably I would go in a panoramic format, and I would brighten up the fog over here a lot more, and also emphasize the light on the walls over here a lot more. Here I'm in the town of Siena, and I really like this Central Plaza that they're having there. There are a lot of people, and because of that, I decided to go in between two buildings, and I used them to create a frame inside the frame and have the tower as the subject. I also have some silhouettes, a few people to give proportions, but in this way I think I managed to capture an interesting image of a crowded place, which is always a challenge when you're visiting crowded places. Now this is a sunset, and we had those dark clouds and only a tiny area on the horizon line, and when the sun hit that area, the valley filled with the light of the sunset. Now in a perfect world, this road would have been taking to the house starting from somewhere around here, but it's not a perfect world, so the road goes here and then it turns and comes to the back of this house over here. Now in post-processing, to emphasize this leading line and also the house and not taking your eye to this area, I will probably darken this area over here and the base, and I will leave the brightness higher on this area, and then I will turn it towards the house. A beautiful, very beautiful sunrise in Tuscany to this chapel, and because of the fog, I positioned myself in such a way to have the sun into these cypress trees and then into the chapel. Now, as the fog evaporated, at some point, rays of light appeared, and it was very beautiful. Now I'm using this grass as a foreground element, and I'm positioning myself in such a way that I have kind of like a triangle over here. You know I'm nuts about triangles and finding pointy things in my photos, and I'm also using this leading line to take to be a baseline for the chapel. In this photo, I really liked the clouds, and I searched for a small house to have in front of the clouds to give power to the landscape, to give you the true proportion of the landscape. This image will be processed in black and white. The blue of the sky would be darkened, and I think the image would look really, really great. Now let's move to the photos from the Dolomites. Here there's a simple reflection, and I've used an ND gradiated filter of 3 stops for the upper part, and I have 3 elements. The lake is the foreground element, and the forest is the middle ground element, and then I have the background element, and finally the subject. And it's a very simple image, but it works. Whenever you have this reflection of the landscape, it always looks like a sound wave, and it always looks beautiful. Here we were shooting sunrise. This is Marmolada, and I've waited again to have the light only on the peak of the mountain. Over here I use a 3-stop ND gradiated filter. Here I have some leading lines that takes you to the mountain, and I think this kind of images work really, really great because only a certain area of the image has the light of the sun. And again, it's the same trick over here where I'm sculpting basically the landscape, having light only on this area. Now you see the true form, true shape of the mountain, and I'm using these hills as leading lines. A long exposure, this is Paso Jau, and over here I have kind of like a leading line that goes up toward the peak over here. The image is a little off, the horizontal line is a little off, but not that much. The shape of the shore of this small pond, it gives the impression that the image is much more crooked than it is. If you look here of the small pole, it's not that off, but you have to be very careful when you're photographing lakes or ponds that the shore can trick you. Now, I really like dramatic images right from the camera. So over here, when I saw this dark cloud, these dark clouds, and the light over here, I exposed for the light, and because of that, I had these mountains in complete darkness, and I also managed to give a sense of depth. Now, because of these mountains are really dark and dramatic, now you can realize that this is much more further away. Over here, I saw this peak, and the light was shining on this peak. And if you take a look, the differences in light between this area and this area and this area are pretty big. If I'm turning on the contrast and I'm getting the brightness of the sky and clouds down, I have a really big emphasis on the mountain over here. And it also has a triangle shape. It also has a longer leading line starting to the left and going to the right that will take your eye over here in this region. Sunset at Trecime di Lavaredo. Over here to the right is Trecime di Lavaredo. I've waited until the light was only on this mountain in the background. Again, this is something that I do often. I wait for the light to be only on my subject, and then I take a photo. And the darkness around the subject works really great. You focus only on this element. And whenever I have the chance to also do a reflection, usually if a sunset is visible, the wind is calm, and the reflection is really beautiful, as you can see over here. A sunrise, again, reflection. First, I captured the first rays of the sun on the mountain over here, and then I thought, why not wait until the sun gets exactly on this edge. And as you can see, I have an f/22 that made the sun look like a star, but the trick is to capture it exactly on the edge over here to not have all the power of the sun into the lens. There's a little bit of lens flare that it's easy to remove. Here I'm on Seceda, and there are a lot of clouds moving very fast. So the light is playing a little show on the mountain, and I'm waiting until I'm having this alternation of darkness and light. As you can see, I have kind of like a big element here that, even though it's not a foreground element, it acts like a foreground element. And I have now you have a true sense of depth. If you take a look at the image, you have darkness, light, darkness, and then there are the clouds. So you realize how big this mountain is. And also the composition is pretty straightforward. It starts to the left, it goes to the right. Here I have a sunset, and I'm having this big element in front of this mountain. I really like doing this because this way you have a sense of depth. And now in post-processing, I would increase the brightness over here on this cloud, and I will dim down the brightness on this area of the sky, and increase the brightness in the mountain and the saturation in the mountain. Now let's move on to the photos from Norway. This was the first day in Norway. It was a really stormy day. There was almost no difference, as you can see, in color between the sky and the sea. And in all this darkness, I have this beautiful piece of land covered in snow, also with these traditional red houses. And this image speaks Norway. You know exactly. It's a vast place with small red houses, and it's a minimalist shot. It's simple, and I think it's really beautiful. Again, from the same day, a really huge storm, and this is an image that speaks north to me. It has this red house. You know exactly what it is. You see you kind of feel the cold. You feel the wind because you see these these moving snowflakes. A sunrise, a very simple sunrise. Now, there are a bunch of rocks, the mountains, and the sky, and the clouds are getting the light of the sunrise. Now, in post,
Of course, I would get rid of the vignetting. I would use a gradiated filter over here in Lightroom to accentuate and dim down the brightness of this area, emphasize this area to have much more contrast, clarity, and brightness on it. Darken the stones, but I will create a path of brighter areas, starting from here and going like in an S shape. The difference in brightness between these areas and these areas would not be great, but it would be enough to have a small guidance towards these mountains in the background. This is the day when I decided I'm going to do all long exposures all day long in Norway. We were on this beach and I saw these waves and the white foam, and I thought it would look really cool, and it did at 118 seconds at f/22. It was really bright outside, but I managed to capture it. I have a lot of negative space, and it's really beautiful. The fact that you see the sand, you know that this is foam, the foam of the water. It's not snow. Another long exposure, 79 seconds. And over here, I would dim down the brightness in this area, increase the brightness on this area. You have kind of like the water, you see how it's flowing into that direction. So the image starts over here and takes you to the right side over here. Again, a long exposure, 82 seconds. And again, I'm having a line going like this, and then this one pushes you forward to the mountains in the background. Very simple compositions. I'm not trying to do very complex composition. I think as simple as possible is the best. Another sunset, 208 seconds exposure, a little bit underexposed. Would have worked probably another 100 exposure, another 100-second exposure, but it's okay. I can get the details, some rocks, the water, and then the light shining only on this element over here. Now, the only reason I did a long exposure over here is because I noticed these pieces of ice moving. Other than that, you can't say that this is a long exposure. 3-stop ND gradiated filter in the top area, and the movement of the ice creates the entire feeling of the image. Again, a pointy element, a long exposure to have a dreamy look, and then the mountains in the background. A very simple image, a very simple composition, but as I said, simple compositions, in my opinion, work the best. And now the last image is this reflection, and I want to point out something. When you're photographing reflections, this is also a long exposure, 99 seconds. And I'm also using an ND gradiated filter of 3 stops. And then over here, you see that this area is darker than this area over here. Usually the reflection is 2 to 3 stops darker than the actual object that is being reflected. If the exposure would have been a normal one, then it would have been a perfect equilibrium between these two areas. But when you're doing long exposures, I noticed that the brighter areas tend to be in much bigger contrast than the darker areas. So even if in a normal exposure I would have no problem of balancing these, probably in long exposure I would have to add another 2 stops to the upper part, but I don't have that option. I can't put 3 filters, and I really try to avoid having that many filters on the image. 2 filters, I think it's more than enough.
So that was it. That was the video with my unedited photos. I hope you like it. I hope you learned something from it. And you can leave a comment below if you have something to say. Please consider subscribing to this YouTube channel, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.